All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our special Google Hangout on air. I'm Sunny Galt with the New Mommy Media Network, and we produce audio podcasts for new and expecting parents. And today, this is a special hangout because we're partnering with the Parent Connection to do a special hangout on raising your spirited child. So before we get into that conversation and we meet our expert, I'd like to introduce you guys to Pam Nagata from the Parent Connection. Pam, welcome to our hangout, and please tell everyone a little bit more about the Parent Connection and what you do and how people can get involved.
Thank you so much, Sunny. And we're so excited to be part of the New Mommy Media podcast. And this is our very first one that we're doing with Jackie Hartman today. The Parent Connection has been around since 1980, and we help support and educate parents with newborn to school-age children. We have local neighborhood playgroups that meet in local parks. We have educational classes, and we have special events like our Breakfast with Santa coming up on December 12th. We also host the family swap meets 3 times a year at Canyon Crest Academy. You can always catch us at sandiegoparent.com or call us at 858-626-6944. Look forward to seeing you, and I hope you enjoy the podcast.
All right. Well, I know I participated in the swap meets for the Parent Connection. It's always been extremely helpful. Us parents, we seem to have a lot of stuff. So being able to swap that out with other parents is really helpful. So Pam, thanks so much for being with us today. So now it's time to meet our expert who's going to be sharing some tips with us on raising your spirited child. All right. So this is Jackie Hartman. Jackie, before we get going, why don't you tell everyone just a little bit more about yourself, your experience with raising, with this topic.
Okay, thank you so much, Sunny and Pam, for having me here today. My name is Jackie Hartman. I'm a mother of 2 very spirited boys, 18 and 14. I'm still alive here to tell the tales about my adventure. I've also been teaching classes for Scripps, the Parent Connection, for about 16 years now. I've been on staff at the YMCA as a parent educator. I'm a certified parent instructor and a life and family coach.
All right, wonderful. Well, we're real excited to talk to you today. Before we get going into our conversation, I do want to let everybody know that we did have, we posted some stuff on social media, and we did get some responses from parents about questions that they had for Jackie. So I just want to reiterate the fact that when we do these hangouts, we're always looking for your guys, your input, your questions, that you can ask your expert these questions, just like I'm asking Jackie, and we really want you to be part of that conversation. So I do have a few here, but if you're watching the hangout and you're like, ooh, I didn't get a chance to submit my question, you can go on over to the episode page for this, which is on newmommymedia.com. That has more information about Jackie and the topic, as well as some resources that we're going to talk about a little later on. And if you scroll to the bottom, you can write your questions in there. All you have to do is sign in through Facebook, so it's super easy. And just wanted to get that in there. So if there's people watching, you're like, ooh, I have a really good question for Jackie, it's not too late. You can still submit. Before we dive into kind of the heart of the spirited child, I feel like we need to talk about temperament. So what exactly is temperament? What do parents need to know about it?
Well, temperament in relationship to our children, and that's what we're talking about, the little people in our lives today. Temperament is a preferred way of responding, or the most natural way of responding to events and people in our lives. And I think it's important to realize that the experts are saying it's biological, so we're born with it. And it just is. It's not good or bad. It's kind of like eye color and hair color. It just is. But it's an important piece of the parenting puzzle.
Okay. So now let's dive a little bit more into defining what a spirited child is. When we say spirited child, what are we referring to?
Well, Mary Sheedy Krasinka, she's the author of Raising Your Spirited Child. She describes it as normal kids who are just more. They're more persistent, they're more intense, they're more sensitive than the average child. All children possess these traits, but spirited children just go to a deeper level. And she affectionately calls them the super balls in the room full of rubber balls, and I just love that.
What I'm thinking is, I've got 4 children total. I've got a 5-year-old boy, a 3-year-old boy, and then twin girls who are 2. And I feel like, some of that might be developmental, like just their age. How can parents kind of define, okay, this is just a stage that my kids are going through, like, okay, it's a 3-year-old and they may be a little bit, more challenging, if you will, or spirited. But how can parents kind of define, okay, this is just a stage versus, okay, this might be something more? How do you know?
Exactly. That's a really good question. And I get that question all the time. And I always say to parents, when you are in a stage, make sure you research before you get to that stage, actually. So if you have a 2-year-old, start Googling and researching what are the crazy, annoying behaviors of a 3-year-old, so you're prepared. And I always say that information is power. For us as parents, the more we know, the more we feel in control and can handle situations. So yes, definitely you need to understand the developmental stages kids go through. That plays a role. Personality or temperament plays a huge role in parenting.
Okay, makes sense. So figure out what's normal, and then you can kind of adjust and see if your child is above that normal level, and that may give you an idea of where to go from there. Okay, makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay. We use the word spirited, and I earlier said challenging. Why do we say spirited? Sometimes when we say stuff like that, some people may be like, okay, what are they really trying to say? So why do we say spirited as opposed to perhaps another word that may not be as optimistic?
Not so positive, correct?
Yes.
Here's the thing. We have to look at how we label our children. And we are our children's greatest advocates and champions. And so we always want to hold them up into their potential and their strengths. And so that's why we look at words like spirited versus difficult or challenging. And we also know this is true. If we say our child is difficult, our child starts to become difficult, and we see everything. We put glasses on to see the difficult nature of our children, and they start to take it on. I had a parent tell me once that her mother-in-law told her youngest that he was a wild man, and at 2, the kid started to say, I'm a wild man, and I'm a wild man, and started acting like a wild man. So we as parents have to look at the words we're using and make sure they speak to our child's strengths and potentials. And we look at it too, as a child, if they're hearing that they're obstinate, stubborn, they don't feel too good about themselves. But if they hear they're goal-oriented, they're persistent, they feel pretty good about themselves.
And what I feel is so interesting about this is the same traits that we view as being so positive, like in adulthood, the go-getters and the people that are out there just kind of making things happen and not waiting for things to happen to them. Like those are really positive and has a really positive connotation as an adult. But as, for children, we kind of say, oh, well, why are you acting that way? And really, on some level, at least, I feel like we should be encouraging that because, again, they're already kind of ahead of the game. Do you feel the same way?
Yes. It's so amazing. I always tell people, those strong temperament traits, they're hard to manage when they're young, but as adults, it's amazing. And so that's the biggest key for us with parents. We have to embrace and nurture their spirit and look for their strengths and potentials and help them learn the skills to develop or to manage that strong temperament to become successful. I always say, too, look at people like Martin Luther King, Bill Gates, some of these people, they all share the same traits. They would score very high in persistence. So, yes, it's more challenging with young people in our lives because we have to teach them how to manage their temperament.
Right. And I also wanted to be very clear, though, just because a child might be spirited, it's not, labeling them as spirited doesn't give them, the get out of jail free card for bad behavior, right? There's a difference.
Isn't that the truth? That's so absolutely true. And it's for all children, really. We do not want to be permissive parents. And with strong temperament, especially those children, they need the guidance, they need limits, and many, many positive discipline techniques. I always say to my spirited parents, or parents of spirited children, you need to have a lot of positive discipline tools in your tool belt to deal with these young people. So yes, never an excuse for bad behavior. And by the way, as people who are parenting spirited children feel, sometimes it's more challenging, sometimes it's more draining, but you have to stick to it.
Right. As with everything in parenting, right? Stick to it.
Stick to it. Yes. This too shall pass.
Right. Exactly. So we had a question from a parent that I thought would fit in pretty well right here. And the question is, what makes them strong-willed? So as a parent, they may have a completely different temperament as their parents, right? So a parent could walk into the situation and be like, where, did that come from your side of the family? That come from, where are they getting this? So where do spirited children get their temperament? How does that develop?
Okay, so I always say to people, it's in the double helix. It comes from the DNA, okay? That's where these temperament traits come from. And it's biological, they're born with it. And guess what? I hate to tell everybody, but if you have spirited children, you probably are spirited yourself or have a spirited partner.
Let's talk a little bit more about the temperament traits. The first one on our list here is intensity. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay. Yes, I love intensity because my household oftentimes feels very intense. And this is how children respond to feelings or emotions, how they react to it. So you have to ask yourself, is my child scream loudly with joy or scream loudly when they're crying, or are they quiet? Okay. And here's the thing, if they have high intensity, it's biological, remember that again, and they have more stress hormones that are released in their body, so the reactions are more intense, they're harder to turn off, and they last longer. And that can be very challenging in families, especially if we do not share that same temperament. So a big piece of understanding temperament is so we can have empathy and parents with empathy.
So we talked about intensity. The next one on our list is persistence.
Yes, good old persistence. Well, that is the trait that is the fuel for power struggles. And I don't know if your family's like mine, but I've been in a power struggle in just about every single situation possible. And so persistence reflects really, can my child stick with the task, or does my child not stick with the task? And they both have challenges. If you have a person that is low on the persistence scale, if you will, they give up easily, or they may turn for someone for help. That has its own challenges. They may frustrate easily. If you have a highly persistent child, they are committed to their goals. They do not like to hear no, and they want it their way. Well, imagine if a parent is very persistent and wants it their way. Again, this could create some challenges in our family.
The next one on our list is sensitivity, and that includes emotional sensitivity and sensory awareness, right?
Yes, exactly. I like to break them out like that because, first of all, the emotional sensitivity piece, and we all know somebody like this, they're very in tune, these children are very in tune to their own feelings and others' feelings, and you can see it at a young age. If somebody's crying, they start to cry, or they run over to see what's wrong, okay? Some people are really tuned into emotion, others are not, and we start to think, oh, can't you be empathetic? They're just not wired that way. That's part of it. We have to teach them to be empathetic. The other one is in relationship to physical stimuli. So lots of times kids are triggered by sights, sounds, smells, tastes, pain levels. Okay, and we all know this, and finally companies are kind of tuning into it. Kids don't like tags, don't like seams in their clothes, and finally companies are making tagless clothes, seamless clothes. What I always say to people is you have to believe your child. If they say there's a grain of sand in their sock, there is a grain of sand in their sock. But if we're late and we're hurried and we have to get to work or preschool, we can find challenges, everything escalates, and we get in conflicts. So it's good to be aware of their sensitivity levels.
Now, I'm assuming these traits, as we're talking about them, it has to be something that is really consistent, a pattern that's really consistent, right? Because I think we can all think about these different traits in our kids and like, oh yeah, sometimes my kid does that and sometimes they don't. So that would, we need some more consistency with this in order to really be able to attribute it to being part of the behavior of a spirited child, correct?
Exactly, and you're right, because people's temperament, we have it our whole lives. It's just as we get older, hopefully we've learned to manage that. So if you saw a high energy baby, infant, they'd be squirming, wiggling, don't want a diaper change, right? Well, as an adult, they may be on the phone talking to somebody, but they're pacing the room. So as adults, we learn how to manage these strong temperament. So yes, it is consistent through our whole lives. We just have to learn tools and tricks to manage it successfully.
Oh, Jackie, I'm a pacer. If that's a strong indication, I may have some spirited children. I may have some of that in the DNA because I am definitely a pacer.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so let's continue on with our list here. Perceptiveness and distractibility.
Okay, that describes exactly what it sounds like, is how easily our children pulled off a task by people or events. And you can only imagine how that can get them in trouble. For example, let's say we have to get out the door for preschool, right? And we send our child away to go get dressed or to put something away. And guess what? These kids don't come back because these kids see the cat and all of a sudden they want to pet the cat, or they see their Legos that they were building last night and suddenly they're building their Legos again. And then as parents, we become very frustrated, right? And these kids get labeled as poor listeners. So you can see the conflict that starts to establish in our families and in schools. Especially in schools, these kids get also labeled as troublemakers, right? Because they're distracted by everything. So there's a lot of tricks we can do in environments we need to look at, like, for example, when choosing schools for our kids.
Does this ever get confused, this trait ever get confused with a child that might have ADHD or something like that, as far as the distractibility?
Absolutely. I was going to say that's exactly, sometimes people say, oh my gosh, he or she is ADHD. Yeah. Well, I always tell people, if you're really concerned with that, you can go to your pediatrician, and they have some great testing nowadays. But it's good to be aware of this temperament trait, that people are easily distracted. Some people we call it perceptive too. These are the kids that see that slice of the moon in the daylight sky. They see the little bug in the crack that we would never see. And so they appear to us to be highly distractible. And then also, if they have high energy, now you get the ADHD piece that other people think when they don't have the awareness.
Okay. All right. So the next trait is adaptability.
Adaptability. This is the key player in transitions. You have to look at, does my child transition easily from activities or events, or not so well? Because I have to say, transitions can be an art form. If you have a child that is slow to adapt to change, and it might look like this: you're going to music class and your child just throws a fit because they don't want to go to music class. Then you get to music class, they throw a fit because they don't want to leave music class. And we start to wonder, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So there's really an art form to smooth transitions with our kids.
Okay. And rhythm, regular versus irregular rhythm. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, this is related to our biological functions like sleep patterns and eating, and potty training comes into this whole thing too. And I always put people on a continuum. There's regular people, and we all know these people. They have to eat like clockwork at 7 a.m. and maybe noon and maybe 6 o'clock, not because their life dictates it, because their body wants it. And if they don't eat in that moment, boom. Irregulars are the kind of people, my husband's one of these, drives me crazy, that at 3 o'clock is like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten today yet. And I'm thinking, what? It's almost dinner time. So when you have children that fall into the spectrum, if they are, let's say I'm a regular person and now I have irregular children, okay, their eating habits can really scare you. Also, if you're trying to potty train, which we all do, potty teach our children, if they're irregular, it sounds really great in theory, like, oh, we eat breakfast and then I put them on the potty and here it goes. If they're irregular, that's going to get in the way. So we have to have strategies. Again, we have to know this about our kids. We might want them to go to bed at night. They don't want to sleep. Causes a lot of conflict in our families. So it's good to know where you fall in that continuum and everybody in your family.
It can be really difficult too if you're a parent that really appreciates like keeping to a schedule where your whole day is based on what your schedule is, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? We can mold our children to fit into our schedules, but it doesn't always go smoothly.
Right. Oh, been there. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about energy level and the activity level of kids.
Well, we talked briefly about this already. Is your child high energy or not so high? And we have to make a lot of, choices in our life around this and look, if we have a high energy child, what do we do that's productive to burn off some of that energy? And we have to look at, too, our school choices. You know, we need to put them in a preschool, for example, that allows the kids to get up and move around, be kinesthetic learners, because they can't sit for a long period of time. Or if, you know, road trips, let's say, hey, let's all go to Mammoth. This is great. High energy child can't really sit in a car that long without throwing a fit. So we have to start looking at our energy levels. Now, the low energy people, you know, what's good about them, they can go on long family trips in a car. It's not a big deal to them, but they do get labeled in our society as kind of, you know, low energy, lazy, that they don't accomplish much. And, you know, they don't like that. So we really have to look and explore our energy level. And like you mentioned, you move around all the time. I'm having a hard time sitting here in a chair talking to you because I would normally be up moving around. So as adults, we learn how to channel that. We got to teach our kids.
You said earlier that you had two spirited kids. So did they get it from your side of the family? Was it your DNA they got it from?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's talk about first reaction. So for a child, their first reaction to something, do they, you know, attack it, approach it, or is it more of a withdraw, right?
Exactly. It's how they look at a situation, event, or people. It's how they attack it. So we have, I call that, we have those people who jump right in. And the great thing about them is what? They have new experiences. They like excitement, but they act and then they think. And that scares us, especially with young toddlers. You know, we have to teach them, think before you act. And on the flip side is then we have those kids that are a little more cautious. They're the ones that become a Klingon. I always say they start grabbing you, won't let go of you. And so there's things we have to do with them, but they can back themselves into a corner and say, no, I don't want to try that. You know, and so we have to gently work with them in their temperament so they don't miss out opportunities.
Okay. And the last one on our list is the disposition or mood of the child.
Oh, yes. Well, we have all known people like this, and this is how we see our world and how our children see the world. And, you know, it's coming from the perspective of, you know, the half full cup or the half empty cup. And the half full people, these people are cheerful and sunny and people like to hang around with them. And the half empty cup, these children usually are a little more gloomy and serious and analytical. And they get kind of a bad rap in our society here. And what we have to teach those children is really good social skills, because you may go over to somebody's house for dinner and they say it like it is. They might say, oh, I don't like these potatoes, there's lumps in it, and it hurts people's feelings. Or they might say, I don't like this birthday present. So with those kids, you know, they're just saying it like it is. They're being analytical, but we have to teach them good manners and good social skills.
All right. So as parents are listening to this, they're thinking about their kids. Okay, does my kid do this? Does my kid do that? And I know we have a resource on our website where people can actually download a handout and kind of figure out on their own, I guess, if they have a spirited child. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, it's the temperament test. I highly recommend it, that you fill it out for your child. It lists all the temperament traits and then has the continuum from 1 to 5. And all you do, like, for example, intensity is up there and it describes it. And under 1 would be a mild reaction, and to 5, and you just circle one number that you think and do that. So and at the end, it gives you a number that you tally, and you can see if you have a cool kid or if you have a spunky child or if you have a spirited child. What's interesting is you'll start to see why certain things trigger you or your partner or your other children. And again, you'll start to learn a lot in how to communicate within your family.
Okay. Now, is there an age where maybe your kid is too young to kind of see these traits when we're talking about them? You know, sometimes with babies, I feel like they change every day. Sometimes you can see, you know, personality and temperament pretty early, but is there like kind of a starting age where you say, okay, this is the point where you probably should be able to see it at least a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, and some of the traits you can see, like if you have an infant that doesn't want diaper change, is squirmy and wiggly, you know, or they won't sit in the car seat. I've had some parents tell me they don't even realize one of their children is, you know, their infant's in the back of the car seat because they're so quiet. So some of the traits you can discern early, but you're right, when they get a little bit older and as their personality starts to develop, you'll start to see more and more of these traits to come out and come alive. And it's hard sometimes though, because if they hit this terrible twos, or I like to call them the terrific twos, you're like, oh, is this developmental? Goes back to what we're saying. Or is this really intensity? And it probably is a combination of both.
Okay, well, last question. What advice do you typically give for parents of strong-willed children or spirited children? This was submitted by a parent. The question actually from the parent is there any hope for the parent of a defiant, strong-willed child? So, of course there is, right? But what do you typically say to parents that, you know, maybe a little bit nervous, maybe they just took that test, right? And they're saying, oh boy, I've got a spirited child, now what? What advice do you have for them?
Well, isn't that interesting too? Because the strong-willed would really be the persistent traits. Okay, that's how it shows up. And for all of us, it's very taxing and trying. So what I suggest is reading up on it, really understanding it. But these children, you have to look at what triggers them, and saying no to a strong-willed or persistent child, if you will, is really a trigger for them. So we have to look at ways to find yes in our life with these children, okay? And remember, these kids wake up in the morning with a goal, whether it is to build that fort or ride that new bike. And if we change that on them, they get upset. So we read up on it. We try to be a resource for them instead of a brick wall, help to find yeses in their life. And these kids, because of power struggles, they need a lot of choices.
So Jackie, we're out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today and for telling us more about how to raise a spirited child and going through those temperament traits with us. It was great chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you. Happy parenting.
Happy parenting. And speaking of parenting, we also want to thank the Parent Connection for partnering with us for this hangout. Of course, you can check out their website at sandiegoparent.com to learn more about their classes, their membership, and all the good things that they offer parents out there. So we would also love for you to visit our website at newmommymedia.com. Again, we produce audio podcasts for new and expecting parents. All of our episodes are free. They are on our website, and we also have free apps so you can take those episodes wherever you go, because I know you guys are busy with your parenting your spirited children. So thanks so much for being with us today, everybody, and we'll see you on the next hangout.